Hi, this is Mitch Stein, CEO and co-founder of Pond, and I'm here today with Tracy Kronzak. Tracy, would love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Mitch. My name is Tracy Kronzak. My pronouns are they, them. I am excited as heck to be joining the Pond Advisory Board. I have had about 20 years, depending on how we want to count it, from figuring out how the fax machine worked in nonprofit technology. I've been on many facets of this ecosystem, both inside of large businesses, startup businesses, service companies, nonprofits themselves, and held a lot of roles. And it is one of the things that I am looking forward to most is kind of taking that morass of wisdom and learned lessons and applying them in new ways here at Pond. So super excited to be joining the team.
All right, Tracy, excited to have you here. Could you start us off by sharing just a few layers of your identity that are most important to you?
Sure. I came of age, for lack of a better way of saying it, during the tail end of the AIDS crisis and the beginning of the culture wars in the 1990s. And from honestly growing up in a very rural part of Southern New Hampshire, which was rural back in those days, I had the benefit of exposure to some very forward thinking from the times, including a dear friend at the time who was involved with ACT UP in New York, or not New York, excuse me, in Boston. And there was a little cadre of us kind of just trying to make our way through high school, but also realizing that who we are, particularly as, for lack of a better way of saying it again, burgeoning queer folk, who we are was getting represented on a global stage. And we had agency over our world. And the way that the government at the time was responding to who we were was not right. And I think that energized me from a very early age to look at society through the lens of who has access to what and what are the consequences. So fast forwarding through the 90s was a lot of education on organizing, advocacy, standing in streets, taking over buildings, learning, racial justice formation work, learning feminist work, finding where gaps and alliances were to be found in all of it. And it has been the part of me that no matter where I've gone to since that has served me most was that decade and a half or so of my life that had me invested in thinking bigger, thinking collaboratively, and thinking about our identities as a shared coalition rather than a tribalist approach.
I love that. And can you just share a little bit about your current role? What are you up to now, and how has that kind of translated into your current job?
Yeah, I don't know if my boss, Tim, always loves it when I say this, but it is true. So my title at my current role is Director of Innovation at a business called Now It Matters. We've also spun up a subsidiary called Why It Matters, specifically around thought leadership in the nonprofit and impact economies. And I like to think that in many ways, part of my job is I go out into the world like a Labrador retriever and fetch bones, and I bring them back to our company. And I'm like, here's another bone. Do we want to do something with it? Do we want to throw it away? Do we want to bury it for later? Do we want to chew on it now? And it suits me because one of the things that I think is really important about working with, using that aggregate term, nonprofits globally, is the ability to meet these organizations where they're at and not where your business is at. So much of our work, particularly with Why It Matters, has been, let's have discussions that are otherwise super hard to have around meeting needs either of movements or organizations, or in some cases DEI work or racial justice, where it's at, rather than saying we've got a business that has a vertical that needs leads or has to produce ACV. That kind of perspective, more and more, in my opinion, is very archaic. And what we're trying to do is both advise businesses and applications on how to reinvigorate their work with these ecosystems using newer approaches.
Well, and I know you've been on just about every side of the sector. If you had to pick, what's the biggest misconception you think about nonprofit work?
I think the biggest misconception, and I've said it again and again, is assuming that working with nonprofits, particularly as a business, is the same as working with any other sector, meaning nonprofits is just another vertical we can put aside our work with energy or manufacturing or drilling or agriculture, right? And it's not, because the fundamental motivation of not-for-profit organizations is mission, not profit. And that's not to say they shouldn't be profitable or that people inside of them shouldn't be paid extraordinarily, unbelievably good wages for their work. But what it is to say is that shareholders are the world around them, not the world of people who have acquired pieces of the business that are always demanding greater output from it. And consequently, serving that as a business, the value of you and how you articulate your literal values, how you articulate your literal engagement, and what you are willing to put behind the services or software or platform that you're developing needs to account for value and community-centric decision-making, not just here's another business vertical that we're just going to try and maximize profit out of. And we're seeing that shift now. Folks are demanding more now, particularly coming out of the past 2 years of 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, and along those lines, like when you've seen nonprofits succeed, because it is different and success is different in the nonprofit space, what's a lesson that you think, aside from just better serving nonprofits, but like more generally for businesses, like what's a lesson that you think more businesses should learn from how successful nonprofits operate?
The successful nonprofits that I've seen work well have articulated an engagement internally and externally that is highly transparent. It doesn't have to be perfectly flat. It's not a democracy in all circumstances, but nonprofits that have transparency, that have the ability to surface concerns from every staff member to the board and back down again, do so in a manner that is consistently upheld, and also do so in a manner that is connected to how and where they want to serve their constituency, are the ones that are successful. And I think sometimes there's a lot of assumptions in the corporate world that, it was told to me once that, you work in the corporate world, you're like a sled dog, and every sled dog has the same view except for one. And that worked until it doesn't, because suddenly people are waking up and realizing, like, I don't want the same view. I want the ability to have agency over where I'm looking, while also supporting this thing in which I believe, or that pays for my family, or that supports my children, or that, allows me to exist economically in this world. And there's been a lot of analysis about that during the Great Resignation, but I think ultimately leading with values that are aligned internally and externally, demonstrating transparency and inclusion, and being able to actually not just sort of in bulk throw people at things, because that's a very archaic way of thinking about it. That word people as resources, it's archaic, and it makes the underpinnings of even transforming the look and feel of the corporate world very difficult, because it turns it into a numbers game rather than a culture and values game. And where those things are aligned is where success happens, even under incredibly difficult circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And my last question for you is about Pond, obviously why we're here today. And super excited to have you on our advisory board and helping us and guiding us. But I'd love to just hear directly from you. Like, what does Pond mean to you? Like, what compelled you to join this group and why are you excited about it?
One of the thing that most excites me about Pond is new approaches to old problems. And one of the things that I know from my own experience, and that is transforming economies, transforming political systems is hard. And it is inevitably rooted in who has power and who doesn't. So one of the things that most attracts me to Pond isn't saying we need to tear everything down. We need to, take the building down to its foundation and rebuild it. What Pond is saying is we need to create new mechanisms by which the power and the privilege of our worlds don't affect the outcomes of what we're trying to do, most explicitly with technology, and doing so in a way that recognizes the realities of our world, at least here in the United States, while simultaneously invigorating people into new ways of acting with each other. And I am all for that because it's not an extreme approach, but it is a novel and new and impressive and exciting approach to be a part of.
Oh, we need to get you on our marketing team, Tracy. I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We're really excited to have you on board and we can't wait to work more together.
I'm super excited to be part of Pond. I am super excited for the other folks on this advisory board. And I feel as if in 2022, great things are on our horizon and look forward to working with everyone.